Welcome to the Future of Us Bookcast, your gateway to insights shaping our future. Today, we're going to be exploring the modern business world, really getting into a fascinating book called The Corporation in the 21st Century. It takes a hard look at how business actually works today and, well, how the language we use to talk about it hasn't really kept up.
That's right. And that gap, that mismatch, is really central to the book's argument. The author uses this great metaphor right at the start, trying to put new wine into old wineskins.
New wine, old wineskins. Okay.
Yeah, the new wine is, the fast-paced, digital, skills-driven reality of how companies operate now.
Yeah.
But the old wineskins, those are the legal ideas, the management theories, the assumptions about capital and ownership that, well, they were basically formed back in the industrial age, the 20th century.
And because they don't fit this tension, it creates what the book calls a huge crisis of legitimacy for big corporations.
Yeah.
What really jumped out at me right away, though, is how the book challenges the way we think about corporate power now. We hear so much about the Magnificent Seven, Apple, Google, NVIDIA, all of them, and we tend to think they're just permanent fixtures.
Right, like they'll be dominant forever.
Yeah, but the book argues the world economy isn't actually controlled by a few giant multinationals in the same way it maybe used to be.
And that's the paradox it kicks off with. The dominance of today's giants, while huge, seems much more, well, temporary, or at least built on a totally different foundation than the dominance of the big industrial companies of the past.
Okay, so to really get this shift, we need to look back a bit first. The book uses Alfred Chandler's work as a starting point, doesn't it? He wrote about those giant American companies that really defined the 1900s.
Absolutely. We're talking about the titans, like General Motors, DuPont, Sears, Roebuck, Standard Oil. These companies were huge, and, they were celebrated because they seemed to have cracked the code for lasting dominance. They scaled up, they integrated everything. They looked unshakable.
They really did. But, look what happened. GM went bankrupt eventually. DuPont got broken up. Sears is there. Well, Sears.
It shows that longevity wasn't guaranteed at all. It proves that core point.
Mm-hmm.
Even the biggest incumbents fail if someone else comes along and meets customer needs better or faster or cheaper.
So what was the fundamental difference? Why did their model fail?
Well, the book argues it boils down to what defined an industry back then versus now. For those 20th century giants, it was all about physical, specialized capital. Think massive steel mills, huge railway networks, giant chemical plants.
Big, expensive stuff that's hard to copy.
Exactly. Hard to copy, hard to repurpose. Owning the physical infrastructure was the power. But today, the economy of the FAANGs, the Magnificent Seven, it's defined by completely different things.
Like what?
Human capabilities, knowledge workers, intellectual property, software, networks. It's much less tangible.
The book uses U.S. Steel as a great example to show this contrast, right?
Oh yeah, it's perfect. Think about 1901. J.P. Morgan puts together U.S. Steel. It's the biggest company in the world, a literal symbol of industrial might, built on physical assets. Fast forward to 2023.
And what's left of it is being bought by Nippon Steel. Its physical power didn't save it in the long run.
Meanwhile, you look at Meta, Apple, Amazon, NVIDIA, Google, Tesla, Microsoft. They're the ones dominating the stock market. And apart from Microsoft, and maybe Apple with its unique supply chain, which the book gets into later, they're mostly not manufacturers in the old sense. They don't rely on those giant fixed physical plants.
So that contrast really sums up the book's whole idea. The source of power has shifted.
Completely. The huge capital barriers that protected GM or U.S. Steel just aren't the main thing anymore. Now it's about capabilities, knowledge, network effects, things that can change much faster. The lesson is clear. Size alone doesn't protect you from disruption.
Okay, so that shift brings us right to the kind of ethical problems and the public perception issues around today's big companies. Chapter 1 is called Love the Product, Hate the Producer.
A very fitting title.
It really is, because we use these companies constantly, right? We fly on Boeing planes, search with Google, connect on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah.
But the trust in the companies behind those products seems incredibly low.
It's a huge disconnect, isn't it? The book calls it a profound social paradox. People love the products, can't live without them sometimes, but they really resent the companies making them. And the reason, the book argues, is this erosion of ethics, these huge inequalities. It's just become too obvious to ignore.
The book talks about this legal idea of corporate puff versus actual misconduct. Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. So companies often use very grand language in their mission statements or marketing. Our clients' interests always come first, or we own safety. But legally, these statements are often dismissed as just, well, puffery, promotional fluff, not a legally binding promise.
Ah, so it's like saying world's best coffee. Nobody expects that to be literally legally true.
Kind of, yeah. But the problem arises when that puffery masks real, deliberate misconduct. And the book gives some pretty stark examples. Goldman Sachs is a big one.
Right. The lawsuit from the Arkansas teacher retirement system, they felt misled by Goldman, saying our clients' interests always come first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Goldman's defense essentially argued that, well, that was just aspirational language, puffery again, not a concrete guarantee of how they'd behave in every single transaction.
Especially those mortgage-backed securities, the Abacus and Timberwolf deals, the book details, where people inside Goldman seemed to know they were, well, not good deals.
That's where it gets really damning. The book includes that famous exchange from the Senate hearing with the CFO, David Viniar. It's the first quote we should probably highlight. Senator Levin is questioning him.
Okay, what did he say?
Levin asked, when you heard that your employees in these emails and looking at these deals said, God, what a shitty deal, or God, what a piece of crap, when you hear your own employees or read about these in emails, do you feel anything?
Wow. And Vineyard's response?
Viniar replied, I think that is very unfortunate to have on email.
Unfortunate to have on email, not unfortunate that they were selling a shitty deal.
Precisely. The significance is crystal clear. The concern wasn't about the fundamental ethical breach designing and selling something you know is bad for the client. The concern was purely about the reputation risk, the optics, the fact that it was documented. It speaks volumes about the culture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's chilling. And it wasn't just finance, right? Boeing is the other major example in this chapter. The 737 MX crashes.
A truly heartbreaking example. The CEO at the time, Dennis Muilenburg, was publicly saying things like, we own safety. But the investigations afterwards revealed just staggering levels of concealment and, frankly, misconduct.
Specifically around the MCS system.
Yes, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. It was software designed to automatically push the plane's nose down in certain situations to make it feel like older 737 models. The problem was, Boeing actively concealed critical details about how powerful this system was, and even its very existence, for the FAA, from airlines, and crucially, from the pilots themselves.
So pilots didn't even know the system was there, or that it could activate based on a single faulty sensor and just keep pushing the nose down.
Exactly. And the book points out that internal simulations showed a Boeing test pilot needed over 10 seconds a lifetime in that situation to figure out what was happening and react to an uncommanded MCS activation. The pilot called the scenario catastrophic. Yet that information wasn't shared properly.
Why? What was the motivation?
Again, it seems to boil down to speed and cost savings. Getting the plane certified quickly to compete with Airbus, minimizing pilot retraining costs, which meant downplaying the differences from previous models. Profit and schedule seem to override engineering integrity and safety.
It just leads right back to that core paradox the book identifies.
It does. And the second quote from this chapter sums it up perfectly. The public hates the producers even as it laps up the products. It's this fundamental tension, this lack of trust, that defines the current corporate landscape.
So, if there's this crisis of trust, how do these companies actually succeed? How does the economy function? Chapter 3, Economic Motivation, seems to go back to some first principles.
It does. It revisits the foundations of prosperity. We usually start with Adam Smith, right? The division of labor.
His pin factory example, 10 workers specializing could make, 48,000 pins a day? Whereas one person alone could barely make 20.
Exactly. Specialization is obviously key for efficiency. But the book argues that prosperity comes not just from specialization, but from something uniquely human. Our capacity for communication and, crucially, cooperation. That's what unlocks collective intelligence.
So specialization is pointless without cooperation.
Pretty much. You can have 10 brilliant specialists, but if they can't communicate effectively, trust each other, and integrate their work, you get nothing. Organizations exist, the book says, precisely because we can achieve things together that are impossible individually.
And the modern examples are just mind-boggling compared to the pin factory, like building an iPhone or a nuclear power plant.
Or even just designing the software that runs our lives. No single person holds all the knowledge. It requires weaving together hundreds, thousands of specialized skills and insights. It's all about collective know-how.
The book uses that great story about the guy who tried to build his own toaster, Thomas Thwaites.
Oh yeah, the toaster project. It's a fantastic illustration. He decided to build a simple, cheap toaster completely from scratch, meaning he had to get the raw materials himself, mine iron ore, extract copper, figure out how to make plastic.
How did that go?
It took him 9 months. It cost about 250 times more than just buying a toaster. And the final product barely worked, and it was apparently quite dangerous.
Okay, so point made.
Absolutely. It just perfectly shows how utterly dependent we are on this vast, invisible network of shared knowledge and specialized production, the collective capability that makes modern life possible.
But the chapter isn't just about how we work together, it's also about why, right? The motivation part. It goes beyond just getting a paycheck.
Definitely. Particularly for knowledge workers. The book stresses that people are motivated by more than just money. They want camaraderie, they want recognition for their skills, they want the satisfaction of contributing to something meaningful, something well-made.
It's about intrinsic motivation, not just external rewards,
Hmm.
which ties into that Steve Jobs quote the book uses.
Yeah, it's a powerful one. The only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do.
That really suggests that creating an environment where people care about the work, where they have that intrinsic drive, is maybe the real competitive advantage. It's not just about owning the machines.
Exactly. Especially now, as the book points out, that old connection where personal wealth directly meant owning productive assets, which directly meant controlling the business that link is breaking down. Ownership is more diffuse, assets are often rented, so motivating the people who hold the actual capabilities becomes even more critical.
Okay, so let's talk more about that fleeting nature of dominance. Chapter 7 is called Changing Fortunes.
Right, it hammers home that point we touched on earlier. Corporate dominance rarely lasts.
The book points to the Fortune 500 list from 1955. The top 10 GM, GE, Sears. Giants of their time. Where are they now? Mostly gone, or shadows of their former selves.
It makes the authors suggest a challenge for journalists. Stop writing stories about dominant companies that failed. That's easy. The list is endless. The real challenge is to find a historically dominant company that actually managed to stay dominant across generations. It's a much, much harder task.
So what about today's leaders? The Googles, the Amazons, the Apples, a trillion-dollar club. The book says their success relies less on physical size and more on generating economic rents through unique capabilities. But don't they seem pretty dominant? Aren't there network effects like Google Search, a new kind of permanent moat?
That's a really important question, and the book addresses it. Yes, network effects create incredibly powerful advantages, that initial lock-in. But the argument is that the foundation of that advantage is still ultimately human capability. The algorithms, the software, the user experience design, and those capabilities can still evolve, migrate, or potentially be leapfrogged by something entirely new.
Like maybe advanced AI disrupting traditional search.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
The moat is deep, no question. But it's a different kind of moat than owning all the steel mills or railway lines. It's based on maintaining that distinctive capability, which is inherently more fluid and vulnerable to innovation than owning physical infrastructure was.
Okay, that makes sense. Which leads nicely into Chapter 8, the decline of manufacturing, and this idea of manufacturing fetishism.
Yeah, this is a really interesting cultural point. It's this deep-seated belief, almost primal, that making physical things manufacturing is the only real economic activity, provides food, shelter, tangible goods. Everything else is somehow less substantial.
Even though the economic data has shown for decades that's not where the value growth is.
Right. The book quotes Alan Greenspan, the former Fed chair, saying way back in 1988.
Let me find that. The exploitation of new concepts accounts for virtually all of the inflation-adjusted growth in output.
Think about that. Virtually all the real growth, even then, was coming from ideas, from intangibles, from software, from new processes, not just from making more physical stuff.
Yet that cultural bias, that fetishism, persists. We still see the decline of iconic factories like Ford's massive River Rouge plant as somehow more tragic than, say, a software company going under.
Exactly. And the book captures this perfectly with a quote from a Red Wall voter in the UK talking about service or knowledge work.
Oh yeah, this one's memorable. It's not a real job if you can do it in your pajamas.
It just perfectly encapsulates that lingering prejudice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even if the knowledge work generates immense value, there's still this cultural sense that physical, often manual labor is somehow more real.
But the book makes the counterpoint about institutional longevity, right?
Yes. Comparing institutions. Oxford University's been around for, 7 or 8 centuries? The Radcliffe Hospital, mentioned in the book, founded in 1770. They persist because they're repositories and generators of knowledge and capability. Compare that to the Morris Motors car plant in Oxford, built in 1922, closed in 1992, 70 years. The physical plant was temporary, the knowledge institutions endure. The real permanence isn't in the steel, it's in the ability to adapt and pass on capabilities.
So if capabilities are key, how does that translate into actual economic value? Chapter 11, Value, gets into the idea of economic rent.
Right. And it's important to clarify what the book means by rent here. Often when we hear rent-seeking, we think of negative things, lobbying for favors, manipulating markets, extracting value without creating it.
Like a landlord just collecting money without improving the property.
Sort of, yeah. But economic rent, in the classical sense the book uses, is different. It's the extra return, the surplus value you get from being distinctively good at something or from having something unique that others want and can't easily replicate. It's the reward for being impressive and differentiated.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's the profit you earn from being genuinely better or unique.
Exactly. The book argues that even the traditional idea of monopoly rent is too narrow. Sure, a company with no competitors earns monopoly rents, but Apple earns rents because it has a monopoly on being Apple, on selling iPhones with that specific ecosystem and brand appeal. Manchester United earns rents from being Manchester United. They are differentiated. Their goal is to capture the value generated by those unique capabilities.
The book uses footballers as a great way to illustrate how this works with capability over time, comparing Sir Stanley Matthews and Lionel Messi.
It's a fantastic comparison. Sir Stanley Matthews, an absolutely legendary English footballer from the mid-20th century. Incredible talent, undeniable capability. But he played under a strict maximum wage cap. He earned about £20 a week, similar to a skilled manual worker at the time.
Even though his talent was incredibly rare and valuable to the club and fans.
Right. Now compare him to Lionel Messi, also possesses extraordinary rare talent. But he earns astronomical sums, millions upon millions. What changed?
The market. No more wage cap, global audience, huge TV deals.
Precisely. The book argues that Matthews' capability generated enormous economic rent, but because of the wage cap, most of that rent was captured by his club. Messi's capability also generates immense rent, probably even more due to the global market, but he is able to capture a huge portion of that rent himself because the market is competitive and restrictions are gone. It shows how capability translates into massive financial rewards when combined with differentiation and market access.
It all comes back to creating and capturing value, which reminds me of that Alfred Marshall quote about the scissors.
Ah, yes, Marshall's scissors. It's a classic metaphor for value. He said, "We might as reasonably dispute whether it is the upper or the under blade of a pair of scissors that cuts a piece of paper, as whether value is governed by utility or cost of production."
Meaning you need both blades to cut.
Exactly. You need utility, the demand, the customer desire, the usefulness, like Messi's skill, and you need scarcity or cost of production, the difficulty of creating it, the rareness, like Messi's unique talent.
Yeah.
Value arises where those two blades meet. Successful modern companies, the book implies, figure out how to sharpen both blades, create something uniquely desirable, and capture the value from its distinctiveness.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to what the book identifies as a really damaging force in recent corporate history. The whole idea of maximizing shareholder value. Chapter 16 asks, must companies maximize profits?
And it really digs into the history and the legal basis, or lack thereof, for this idea. It challenges that famous Milton Friedman doctrine from 1970 that the only social responsibility of business is to increase its profits.
Is that actually legally required?
Well, the book points out it's not a universal mandate. German law, for instance, takes more of a stakeholder view. The company should serve the public good, not just shareholders. But in the U.S., especially influenced by Delaware court decisions, the law does lean very heavily towards shareholder primacy.
Like that old case Dodge v. Ford from 1919.
That's a classic example. Henry Ford wanted to reinvest profits back into the company, lower car prices for consumers, pay workers more. He argued the business should benefit society broadly. But the Dodge brothers, who were shareholders, sued him.
And they won.
They did. The court basically said Ford had to prioritize distributing profits to shareholders as dividends. The book uses a great analogy. We need to breathe to live, but the purpose of life isn't just to breathe. Similarly, companies need profit to survive, but profit doesn't have to be their sole purpose.
There was a more recent case too, right? eBay and Craigslist?
Yeah. Yes. Newmark v. eBay in 2010. The founders of Craigslist deliberately chose not to maximize profits. They wanted to keep services free or cheap for users, even though eBay, a major shareholder, wanted them to monetize aggressively.
And the court sided with eBay.
Essentially, yes. The Delaware court delivered a pretty clear statement, which is our next key quote. Quote, A corporate policy that specifically, clearly, and admittedly seeks not to maximize the value of a for-profit Delaware corporation for the benefit of its stockholders is invalid. So, in that legal context, prioritizing anything over shareholder value maximization is problematic.
So that legal pressure really paved the way for this intense focus on short-term profits, which leads to Chapter 17 and the wonderfully named leaky pipes and overflowing sewage.
It's such a vivid and accurate metaphor for the damage caused by short-term thinking, driven by shareholder value pressure.
Explain the leaky pipes idea.
Okay, so imagine new management comes in, and their main goal is to boost the share price quickly. The easiest way to boost short-term reported earnings is often to cut or defer long-term costs. So they slash the R&D budget, they put off essential maintenance, they cut back on customer service staff.
Pipes of the business.
Exactly. On the surface, profits jump up. The market rewards them. Everything looks great for a quarter or two. But internally, they've stopped maintaining the essential infrastructure. The pipes are leaking, getting weaker.
Until eventually.
Eventually, the pipes burst. You get a catastrophic product failure, a major safety incident, a collapse in customer loyalty, a regulatory crackdown. The sewage overflows. The short-term gains are wiped out by long-term disaster.
Enron is the poster child for this, isn't it? Driven by manipulating the numbers.
Absolutely textbook example.
Yeah.
Jeff Skilling and Andrew Fastow used aggressive accounting tricks like mark-to-market, which let them book all the estimated future profit from a long-term deal immediately the day it was signed. It created this illusion of incredible, smooth, ever-increasing earnings.
But it wasn't real profit yet, and they hid the debt.
Massively. They use these things called special purpose entities, SPEs. Basically, complex off-balance sheet vehicles designed to hide billions in debt from investors and auditors. The book mentions a play about Enron, where these SPEs were represented by actors wearing reptile heads fittingly. It was all about managing the reported earnings, borrowing from the future, until the whole elaborate structure collapsed.
So Chapter 22, The Fall of the Icons, ties this all together, showing how this shareholder value obsession hurt even established giants.
Yes, it argues that companies like ICI, Sears, Marks & Spencer, GEC, even IBM during certain periods declined because management got distracted. They became obsessed with hitting quarterly financial targets to please the stock market, and they took their eye off the ball, the core business, the engineering, the customer relationships, the long-term health of the company.
And the ultimate quote summing up this destructive mindset comes from Harry Stonecipher at Boeing after they merged with McDonnell Douglas.
Oh, it's a devastating quote. It perfectly captures that shift in priorities, Stonecipher said. When people say, I changed the culture of Boeing, that was the intent, so it's run like a business rather than a great engineering firm. It is a great engineering firm, but people invest in a company because they want to make money.
Run like a business rather than a great engineering firm. Wow.
It just lays it bare, doesn't it? The belief that financial optimization is superior to or separate from the core purpose and expertise of the company. And as we saw with the 737 MAX, prioritizing short-term financial appearances over engineering integrity can have truly catastrophic consequences.
Okay, so after diagnosing the problems, the book does move towards solutions, right? What does a successful 21st century corporation look like? Chapter 24 is Combinations and Capabilities.
Yes, this section starts outlining the positive model. The argument is that the successful modern company can't operate like an old-school, rigid hierarchy focused on physical assets. It has to function more like a cooperative community that's defined by its unique capabilities.
That collective intelligence again. How the group works together.
Exactly. And that intelligence, that ability to innovate and execute, isn't something you can just buy or command from the top down. It's built through learning, through apprenticeship, through social interaction, through trust.
Which was really put to the test during the pandemic with remote work, wasn't it?
Massively. The book brings together comments from several CEOs who, despite making remote work function, all acknowledged something vital was missing.
Like Satya Nadella at Microsoft worrying about burning through social capital.
Right, he said. Maybe we are burning some of the social capital we built up in this phase where we are all working remote. Tim Cook at Apple said something similar about missing the essential element of being together. The truth is that there has been something essential missing from this past year. Each other.
And David Solomon at Goldman Sachs was even more direct.
He really was. He called remote work an aberration for a business like theirs, emphasizing the need for physical presence. I do think for a business like ours, which is an innovative, collaborative apprenticeship culture, this working from home is not ideal for us. And it's not a new normal. It's an aberration that we're going to correct as soon as possible.
So these leaders recognize that building and maintaining those core capabilities really requires people to interact, to build trust face to face.
It seems so. It supports the book's core idea, which actually echoes Edith Penrose's work from way back in 1959. She argued that a firm isn't just a bundle of contracts or assets, but is defined by its ability to provide productive services, or, as the book puts it, the attempt of a particular group of people to do something. It's about the collective doing.
And managing that collective doing requires a different kind of leadership, a different structure than the old command and control model.
Definitely. Chapter 25 shares a letter from Arnold Weinstock, who ran GEC in the UK. He rejected the traditional top-down hierarchy.
What did he propose instead?
He championed what the book calls ratifying hierarchy. The idea is that the experts, the people on the ground with the knowledge, should make the decisions. The role of senior leadership is primarily to ratify those decisions, to back them rather than dictate them.
And that famous letter he sent.
It's brilliant. He basically disbanded a bunch of central committees and told his operating unit managers in no uncertain terms. But remember that you will be held personally accountable for any decision taken affecting your operating unit, and also remember that you are not obliged to join any such gathering.
Wow. So total accountability, but also total authority delegated to the person responsible.
Exactly. Make the decision, you own the consequences. It pushes authority down to where the knowledge resides. A radical idea then, and still pretty radical now.
And this different way of managing fits with how companies themselves are structured now, right? Chapter 27 talks about the hollow corporation.
Yes. The old Henry Ford model, owning everything from the iron ore mine to the final car dealership, total vertical integration that's largely gone.
Replaced by
Outsourcing, platforms, franchising. Think about Nike. They focus on design, branding, marketing, the core capabilities, but outsource almost all the actual manufacturing, often to Asia. That's Nikeification. Or McDonald's relying on franchisees. Or Amazon's marketplace and Apple's App Store acting as platforms for others.
So the central company becomes kind of hollowed out. It's coordinating a network rather than owning all the pieces.
Precisely. This allows for an incredibly complex and vast division of labor, far beyond what Adam Smith could have imagined. But it means the corporation itself is less about tangible assets and more about managing relationships and capabilities within that network.
The book has that funny adapted quote from William Blake to capture this.
Oh yeah, the twist on the tiger. Did he who made the lamb make thee? Or an external franchisee?
It's a humorous way to point out how disconnected the brand we interact with often is from the actual entity doing the manufacturing or providing the service. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the book's argument. This final section looks at the consequences of this hollow corporation model, especially around finance and ownership. Chapter 28 is Capital as a Service.
This is where things get really mind-bending. It highlights this incredible divorce between the financial value of a company and the physical assets it uses.
Amazon is a prime example again, a multi-trillion-dollar company.
That owns almost none of the key physical assets it relies on. The giant warehouses,
Right.
leased from specialist real estate firms like Prologis, the cargo planes, leased from aviation firms like AirCap. Amazon consumes logistics and infrastructure as a service. It doesn't own them.
And even the money it uses. The book mentions no networking capital.
Yeah, this is amazing. Because Amazon sells goods so quickly and pays its suppliers relatively slowly, it often holds on to the customer's money before it has to pay the supplier for the goods. In effect, its suppliers are financing its operations. It doesn't need traditional working capital loans for that part of the business.
So the whole financial structure is just different.
Yeah.
The link between the stock price and actual physical stuff is weak.
The book says it's never been more tenuous, especially for the big tech giants. Think about it. Why do people buy shares in Alphabet or Amazon or Tesla? It's not for the dividends, they don't pay any.
Right. It's purely for the expectation that the stock price will go up.
Exactly. Driven by growth expectations, maybe share buybacks, but not by a direct return of profit generated from physical assets in the traditional way. It's a highly financialized system.
So if the physical assets are rented and the financial value is based on future expectations, what is the real core asset? Chapter 31, In Search of Capital, must address this.
It does, and it comes back to something we've been discussing all along. The book argues that the old cliche, our people are our greatest asset, has actually become literally true in a commercial sense.
Meaning human capital.
Yes. The collective knowledge, the skills, the experience, the culture, the unique capabilities of the workforce. that is the fundamental source of competitive advantage and long-term value creation today, not the buildings or the machines.
The book also brings in social capital here, right? Robert Putnam's idea.
It does. Putnam talked about the value of networks, shared norms, and trust within a community. The book connects this directly to economic success, pointing to examples like industrial districts in Italy, where tight-knit communities with high levels of trust and cooperation fostered incredibly successful clusters of specialized firms, like furniture makers in Meta. Social fabric enables economic dynamism.
Okay, so we have human capital, social capital, but it all sounds a bit less precise than counting factories or inventory, which leads to the final chapter, chapter 32. Ambiguity is a feature, not a bug.
A perfect title to wrap things up. The core message here is that we need to accept a degree of fuzziness. The neat, clean concepts we rely on to understand the economy ideas like market, hierarchy, capital, ownership, they're essential tools, but they just don't have the sharp, precise definitions that maybe economists or lawyers wish they had.
The real world is messy.
The real world is complex and ambiguous. Trying to force it into overly simplistic boxes doesn't work. The book uses Stuart Macaulay's metaphor of a rheostat, a dimmer switch, to describe long-term business relationships.
Not an on-off light switch.
Exactly. A relationship evolves, gets stronger, weaker, shifts. You can't always pinpoint the exact moment it's on or off. It's continuous, it's nuanced. Those binary, clear-cut legal or economic models often miss the reality of how things actually function.
So we need to be comfortable with that ambiguity.
We have to be. The final quote the book uses, from George Goodman writing as Adam Smith, sums up this need for intellectual humility. On the road from the city of skepticism, I had to pass through the valley of ambiguity.
You can't get to understanding without accepting some uncertainty.
That seems to be the message. To really grasp the 21st century corporation, you have to navigate that valley, recognizing that the old maps, the old definitions from the industrial era just don't perfectly fit the landscape anymore. Hashtag tech outro.
Well, that's quite a journey through the corporation in the 21st century. It really feels like the core message is that we're operating with an outdated blueprint for understanding business.
I think that's a great way to put it. The challenges aren't just about scandals or bad actors. They're fundamentally structural and conceptual. We're using the wrong language, the wrong models, for a new reality.
So, just to recap the book's main arguments for everyone listening.
Sure. First, that old 20th century model of the giant, capital-heavy corporation. It's basically obsolete. Its dominance was never guaranteed to last. Second, what drives success now are these distinctive capabilities and collective intelligence. That's the real core asset, much more than physical stuff. Third, the whole doctrine of maximizing shareholder value above all else. The book argues it's often been incredibly destructive, leading to short-term thinking and that crisis of trust we talked about. And finally, ownership and control are increasingly separated from tangible assets. You get the hollow corporation operating through networks and platforms.
Okay, and based on all that, what are the key takeaways for us as we navigate this modern economy?
Well, here are a few key things to keep in mind. Companies today really survive and thrive by building and nurturing their unique capabilities and their human capital. And that requires fostering trust and often some level of physical interaction. Real collaboration and that intrinsic motivation, people wanting to do good work, are way more important for innovation than just relying on rigid contracts or top-down control. The language we often use focused on physical capital, clear ownership, simple profit maximization, it just doesn't quite capture the complex reality of today's knowledge-based, fragmented value chains. We need a richer vocabulary. That intense focus on short-term financial results, the leaky pipe syndrome, consistently undermines long-term value and can destroy the core strengths, like engineering excellence, that made a company great in the first place. And maybe most importantly, the successful modern company needs to act like a cooperative community. It has to manage complexity and ambiguity, not search for simplistic binary answers that don't fit the real world.
It really shifts the focus, doesn't it, from just looking at the balance sheet to thinking about the health of the organization as a community, its ability to learn and adapt together.
Absolutely. That capacity for collective action, for adaptation, that's the ultimate asset. And it's fragile. It can be easily damaged by management that's only looking at the next quarter's numbers.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Us Bookcast. We hope you found inspiration in these ideas. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Together, we're co-creating the world of tomorrow.